Sana Oslerson. My partner in crime fighting, Mr. Greg Burrow, and loan from us from Dragular Comics and Fantasy. Thank you very much for, make sure if you're in Austin, you check them out. And then my loving husband, Mr. Bo West, who is going to try and keep me from saying stupid stuff, but, you know, whatever.
Sorry.
All right, so what are we doing this month? We are going to be talking about deconstruction. Deconstruction is something that's popped up here and there in some of our other topics. It's actually got a very deep vein of effective in the comic book genre, especially as it relates to superheroes. And we're going to kind of go into depth of that and split it into two basic categories. We're going to go with the dark and gritty, which is this week, and then next episode, we'll talk about parody, because in itself, parody is a deconstruction of anything. So we're basically going to give you like a little variety here. We're going to do the two sides of the deconstructed coin. You know, we're going to have like the dark and gritty this week, and then the light and, you know, silly next week. And starting off with deconstruction and the dark and gritty. Tell us, what is deconstruction to you?
Deconstruction to me is you're taking it's like in a story, you're taking the elements of something that's part of the zeitgeist and like picking it apart and twisting it and picking times to be like, oh yeah, it's like, what if this went in this direction, trying to give it a more grounded feel, but yeah, basically you're taking something and you're critiquing it. It's like, what about you, Greg?
Done well, and in the best of it, it would be like The Dark Knight Returns or Watchmen, where it's actually like a deep dive character study into what makes these characters tick, and about the superhero
study into their political environments and everything.
Yeah, it's not just who they are, but also what they mean to like society as a whole.
Your basic is subversion of expectation.
Yes.
It's taking elements that you expect to be one way and then making them something else. And yours is the depth of character development, less superficial characterizations and environments.
It's a study. It's a study on the entire genre.
Yeah. Yeah. As any good imitation does. So you mentioned The Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen. Very few people are not familiar with The Watchmen at this point. And if you're not aware of the very first grim Batman story, you would have to go back to the Dark Knight Returns.
Yes.
And those both came out in 1986. Now, there are some stories that comic book historians kind of like to think might be influential, like things like the Dark Phoenix Saga or the Judas Contract. Those were very, very deep and much more nuanced motivations, characterizations than had appeared in comics at the time.
It's not so much a deconstruction of their genre.
But it's not so much a deconstruction of their genre. It just signals the beginning of the first real generation of comic book fans to not give up their fandom. Like previously, comic books the marketing was towards 14-year-old and younger.
Yes.
And it was very meant to be that, and there was the assumption that by the time the kids were over 14, they wouldn't want to read comic books anyway. So
they grow out of it.
But it wasn't until the writers grew up in wanting to keep those comics, they wanted to continue for the comics to mature as they did.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what really led to the first deconstruction movement in 86. 86 is also, what else happened in 86?
It's like, a lot of fun things happened in 86. Okay, that's why I'm like...
Sort of 86. 85 was the Crisis on Infinite Earths, where DC rebooted their universe, like a whole clean slate kind of thing, integrated new characters and everything. So yes, in 86, when they were all relaunched, they were relaunched into a more mature, more modernized sensibility, more adult-oriented themed stories.
Right.
So even by default, the new DC was slightly deconstructed.
Right. Well, and there's a lot of historical events feeding into this, because it's like, about the 60s and 70s is when we started getting the more like cool, edgy underground comics, where it's like, oh yeah, no, we're gonna be talking about hookers and blowing junk. And
Well, I mean,
it's like,
even in the '60s, Marvel was doing a lot of that too. I mean, Marvel dealt with, there was like a one issue of Spider-Man that was famous for dealing with drugs.
yeah, and it's like that's it.
Well,
And it's like
characters like Cloak and Dagger,
yeah.
Radioactive.
That's the 80s.
It's like we're
Does
we're
85, 86 not fall into the 80s?
Oh, okay, no, they're talking.
Oh yeah, no. It's like we're getting all the intertwined bits.
Yeah.
It's like because it starts out like, yeah, most of those kids who read those edgy comics when they were kids, we hit the 80s, and it's like the 80s was I'm sorry, Gen Z guys, it was a rough time for all of you. It was a really rough time for all of you guys.
I mean, even Batman had shoulder pads.
Yeah, it's like what you did.
Just saying.
It's like, and we were coming out of the Vietnam War.
Yes.
So it's like, so our view of the things that like give us hope and what we consider justice changed dramatically in the last couple of years. That's why the kids in the 80s were like the super disillusioned generation. It's like that's when grunge was happening.
Yeah.
That's when it's like it was.
Grunge starts at the end of the 80s. You're right. That kind of leads us into the 90s. 90s is considered like the hardcore, deep armpit,
And
like
Rambo.
Yeah, it's
Rambo.
So many things in the 90s. It's not a coincidence that the 90s was also, grunge rock was created, and
it's like
I hate to tell you guys this, but I lived in the 80s, and the 80s were all about fun.
Yeah.
I mean, we had so much fun in the 80s.
It's
70s and 80s, it was all about having fun.
Yeah, well, but it's still the person who we considered a hero that enacted justice changed dramatically.
That's why it took a little time to roll down, obviously, because the DC thing was like the year after '86. It took a few years for them to build up to getting to the 90s.
Knowing parents and people from the 80s, not everybody had fun in the 80s.
But the 90s,
I promise.
The 90s is...
Not everyone had fun in the 70s either.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But,
I'm not supposed to talk bad about Rob Liefeld, so I'll just say he was born on the same day. He was born on the same day as Kurt Cobain. So there, that's my...
A little bit of trivia.
It's my...
It was the
I would
funnest
say also that if you want to see deconstruction, one of the first really massive deconstruction comics was Martial Law, and that was huge, and that was in the late '80s.
Yeah,
what you were saying is it's a more or less a forerunner to The Boys.
Very much so.
The Boys don't have.
Oh yeah, we're gonna talk on what's going on now.
Right.
Deconstruction here in a minute. We're just trying.
But let's dig deep into the tropes.
Setup, y'all. Yes, exactly.
We're gonna figure out all the different things we're gonna tackle, because the problem is people are gonna figure out like, but what is just dark, gritty, and edgy, and what is actually like a critique on a current superhero or the superhero genre. It's like those are entirely.
We put our heads together and come up with like some academic information here for y'all.
We're trying our best, guys. We're trying our best for you.
Basically, I came down to the conclusion that the three main catalysts in a deconstructed story, and let me just warn you all ahead of time, almost like 75 to 90% of what we find that is a deconstruction of superheroes is specifically Superman.
It's specifically Superman.
Like Superman, Batman gets a good chunk. But
he was already halfway
there, exactly. But people really like that. But ultimately, it's taking your hero and putting him in a unlikable position, either with or without the expectation that they will redeem. And this is usually done in one of three ways. There's the corrupted or controlled.
Yes.
Something happens. They get poisoned, or they become a werewolf, and they don't have time. Yeah.
They get that poison ivy kiss, etc.
Yeah, so they're good heroes and everything. It's not their fault they're acting bad.
Yes.
There is replacements. They would swap them out for a darker, more violent character. So for some reason, U.S. Agent and Azrael Batman and characters of that nature.
Yeah.
And the third one is they just snapped. For some reason, it's like the Killing Joke. It's people like to prove that theory right. If you're not familiar with the Killing Joke, the whole theory is that all it takes is one bad day.
Yeah.
Joker comes to the conclusion it's not his fault, he's crazy, he had a really bad day, and any person under similar stress is going to snap. And that's the third main vein of deconstructed heroes. Is something happen, whether it's Lois Lane gets murdered or...
right, for anybody who watched Snyder Cut, literally that moment where the nightmare scenario happens, that is a just snap scenario.
Yeah, that's a just snap scenario. So those are the ones I kind of...
I think that's a controlled just snap scenario.
I mean, it's one of those he snapped and then
Darkseid takes
he's like, hey
advantage
man,
of it.
Okay.
Hey man, yeah.
Moment of weakness can mind control. I get that.
Well, I mean, in the Snyder Cut, that's where the anti-life equation was, and so he used. This is my take on the 15 seconds you see. Darkseid has the anti-force equation back. Whatever happened that Lois died left just enough opening for Darkseid to use the anti-force equation
to be like,
take control of.
to be like, hey buddy.
Okay, so combo. He had a snap moment and lost it just long enough to be corrupted. So that fits. Now, like I said before, the majority of these are Superman centric, and of those, it always ends up almost always comes back to dictator, totalitarian, fascist Superman.
Yes, and that one I found out was super fascinating.
Why? Yeah, I know. There's so much that goes into, and it goes so much further than ultimate power corrupts.
Oh no, it's actually going through it, because this is going to be one of my TikToks I do later. Where dictator Superman comes in is basically, it's once we hit about the 80s, they consider Superman and it's everybody else grows and changes with the times. Superman doesn't. He maintains this very optimistic. Yeah, maintains this very optimistic character, and so all the dictator Superman things that resonated with me a little bit more are literally the author thinks he is a relic of a bygone era, and because he is an alien with superpowers, he's not as relatable as some other characters that they create that are closer to the ground.
I completely disagree with that as a belief. I do not believe that you have to make a character dark or violent to make them relatable.
Well, it's just what they've been trying to do to Wonder Woman forever.
Yeah.
Well,
it's the exact same thing.
It pisses me off all the time.
Well, and it's
basically
not
what it comes down to.
It's not necessarily that they think he needs to be darker and grittier. It's that some of the ideals. Basically, he's not a character that can adapt with the times. Because that's kind of
Yeah. Well, I understand the sentiment. I understand.
That's what they're trying. That's what they're trying to say.
We get it. We just don't agree.
Disagree.
It's
a lot of it comes down to the writers thinking they're being all witty and snazzy and everything, and doing something that hasn't been done that's actually been done so many times.
But the good example of that is still Kingdom Come. Thinking exactly of that.
Now, you want a character that couldn't adapt with the times? I love it. You love it because they pretty much write that into his story that after a point he kind of snaps because he can't adapt to the times. The Question.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I'm still catching up, guys. I'm sorry.
The Question is actually one of my favorite. I guess it was actually the Denny O'Neil was definitely deconstruction. I mean, that was
because
that was absolutely 100%.
Yeah, so, he's definitely deconstruction because.
So for those who don't remember, Question is one of my favorite characters. Steve Ditko designed him. I love him. He does all the Carlton characters. And for those that you don't know, the Carlton characters were adapted into the characters we see in The Watchmen. So Rorschach is actually based on the character of the Question. And the Question, when they
loosely.
Well, the interesting thing is this: is when Crisis on Infinite Earths, when DC absorbed the Carlton characters, they wanted to use them in some interesting way, and that's when they let Alan Moore write what originally Watchmen was supposed to be: Captain Atom, Peacemaker, the Question, Blue Beetle, and Phantom Lady. and all of them were Carlton characters that they brought over. Was it Phantom Lady or Nightshade? I can't remember. But
I think it was Phantom Lady because in the long run they didn't even bother changing her costume; they just changed her name.
Maybe, but ultimately, like
they're not that far.
They decided that they wanted to still be able to use these characters later on, and they knew that in the format that Alan Moore was doing it, is like these characters would be kind of ruined. So
he kind of has an issue with that.
So they basically encouraged him to retool them, and this is where we get the Watchmen that we see. But questions based on Watchmen, and then shortly after the popularity of the Watchmen comic book, and they tried to integrate some of the characters into the main DC universe, the Blue Beetle being like one of the main ones in the Keith Giffen Justice League. But it was the Question, the Denny O'Neil comic, which was one of the first really was it a Vertigo? Was it the Question? The Vertigo?
I think it was, yeah.
Vertigo is definitely something important to talk about when we're talking about deconstruction, because it was the first time that comic book companies, DC for this example, had taken such a notice of the dark or gritty or deconstructed tone that they actually wanted to keep them separate.
Yeah.
So they started retooling really old characters,
Swamp
and
Thing.
it was like one of the things I'm talking about now. Now there's so much variety, but like when we were kids, to have a choice of two different DC comics, kid ones and adult ones.
And the grown-ups.
Yeah, and the grown-up
The
ones.
big boy
That
comics.
really was a big. But that's where you get John Constantine from. He's a direct result of the Deconstruction era. Swamp Thing story, the Neil Gaiman Swamp Thing, and everything.
Right, but all the big ones are talking about, like, there's Dictator Superman, which is just he's so stuck in his ideals that he doesn't realize shit's going horribly wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also, they say murder Batman, it's fascist Batman.
Fascist Batman.
It's like they allude to it in the Dark Knight movies, where it's like, oh yeah, he's got all these cameras looking for this stuff, and Morgan Freeman's character is like, this is a little much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like that's sort of what they're alluding to. It's like because Superman has a lot of physical power, and Batman's thing is he has a lot of tech power. Yeah, he has political power, and he has basically is enough influence in the town to have this kind of government.
Well,
and by the time we get to the 80s and the 90s, we're like, hey, oh no,
Yeah,
wait a minute.
One of the things I kind of enjoyed in the comic books a couple of times is the way they beat Luthor is Batman just out businessmans him.
Yeah.
But even in the Bruce Timm animated universe, took cues from Dictator Superman, Fascist Batman. When they did, what was the name of Another World, A Better World? They end up in a world.
When they do the Justice Lords.
And this is where we're going to talk. Just snapped. The Flash on the Justice Lords. The Justice League ends up going to a world where the Flash was murdered by Lex Luthor, and Superman snaps, and
he's like, no.
I think that was Justice League Unlimited.
It was Justice League Unlimited
Is
or
it?
Justice League. It was in the Bruce Timm Justice League. It was in one of those. Yeah.
One of the ones I really liked was the one where it was Batman and Superman Adventures, where Batman got controlled by nanites in his brain.
Oh,
and
yes,
then Superman took over for Batman and was like pretending to be
voice.
Yeah, trying to pretend to be
I
Batman.
like at the end, Robin's like, "How did you do the voice so well?" He goes, "I have precise muscle control," and he says it in Robin's voice.
Oh
and
my
I would
God.
just never do that
Everyone's
again.
like, "Never do that again."
Oh Jesus.
But yeah, Dictator Superman, like it goes. There's a lot of them.
Yeah, and I still won't forgive you for me noticing Dictator Superman over and over again, because now once you realize that everybody's trying to make Superman evil for
Right.
whatever reason.
it's like either they're trying to make a character that's like, what is Superman but evil, or they'll be like, you know what's going to make this a very hopeless situation if Superman and Unstoppable Force becomes evil.
Mm-hmm.
For no reason, just by the
Boys.
way.
Yeah.
I mean, it get the.
I'm not even talking outside of comics
It goes
yet.
on and on and on. It's.
It's like, but that's mostly why they focus on Superman, because it's like he is a beacon of hope whose morals haven't really changed much. It's like, or well, hadn't changed much by the time the 80s came around, and so they're like, yeah, we'll just keep pressing this button over and over again, and it'll be exciting.
Well, they had already experimented with the idea of the evil Superman with, the opposite universe, Earth 3 originally.
Well, not only that,
I mean,
every single time they've used red kryptonite in the comics, they've been
Well,
using red
yes.
kryptonite since, what,
Well,
the 50s?
Yeah, that goes under corrupted or control. He's poisoned. His mind is poisoned by the radiation.
Yeah.
They use that on the Smallville show. There's been
Yeah.
the Ultraman on the Smallville show. There's been the Red Kryptonite on the Smallville show. Red Kryptonite came up on Supergirl. Bizarro was like one of the earliest characters from Superboy in almost every medium. It's just
Right.
the one that more recently they had in the comic books was Superboy Prime, who is a straight up villain.
Yeah.
But there are stories where he's the dictator's main ones is like Superman the Dark Side, where he's like
Yeah.
controlled by Dark Side, which is interesting if y'all aren't familiar with the Bruce Timm universe, was actually the finale of the animated Superman show. The last episode of the animated Superman show was him finally defeating Dark Side, but he'd already lost the trust of everybody because he was controlled. Presumably, they actually never really say how that he started winning people back, but by the Justice League series, he'd kind of been okay with public terms. However, this led, to Hamilton creating Cadmus, and those are all directly from the whole what if Superman go wrong.
Right. It's like, just mostly it was like, let's make him evil, and then after a while they were like, but what if things went wrong, but nothing happened to him?
Yeah.
Like, he was the same person, just instead of it going in this direction, we're just going to take the scenario.
I think that's why I like the Red Sun Superman more the comic more than the movie, but
that's a very post, because I think that was post 9/11.
Yeah.
Where they really were suddenly like, oh yeah, no, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay.
And the interesting
I do
thing
like
about,
Red Sun.
The thing about Red Sun that I like is I to whatever degree of success is yours to judge, but they are not just straight out the gate saying, oh, this is an evil Superman. This is just Superman brought up with different values. And so he's not necessarily evil, and it takes him a while to understand why people see him that way. And he does come around to seeing. And
right.
He does come around. He starts to understand another point of view, and he changes his mind, and he's not actually evil. And I like that.
Those are the kind of stories I liked that were dictator Superman stuff. It's like, it's not as much fun if you just make him murder everybody.
Yeah, but murder Superman and murder Batman.
Like keeping the same character and just kind of shifting things over.
A deep dive character study.
Yeah, it's a character study. It's like, yes. If I told you in something he accidentally creates a gulag for superheroes, you'd be like, what? That sounds awful. But when you read the story, it's like, oh, yeah, okay, I get it.
Well, we actually found a few good examples of deconstruction without going the route of necessarily evil.
Right, or violent murder.
Even all the way back to whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow, which was the last Superman story before they rebooted the universe. That was a lot of deep character study, a lot of adult themes, a lot of psychological examination in that one.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, Kingdom Come by Mark Waid and Alex Ross. Other than being just visually stunning.
It's beautiful.
It's got a great story about the juxtaposition of the outdated Superman, hokey, white hat cowboy.
Right, he's still a very optimistic character.
And then, the modern age of, the dark heroes, like we said, the grunge heroes of the 90s and everything. And it puts them in an actual cross-examination, which is kind of cool. But my favorite deconstructed, to me, adulty Superman is All-Star Superman.
I did like All-Star Superman.
All-Star Superman is a really, it was if I were a kid watching this Superman cartoon, I would be traumatized because it is so sad.
Mm-hmm.
And so beautiful at the same time. And you're just it's overwhelming with emotions, and it really does make you examine. But they don't do it by going more real world. I hate when they say real world.
Right.
But instead of doing that, they just went more fantastic.
Yeah.
They just went bigger, and they made it. They leaned into it, and you still get that full satisfaction of that examination without having to be bogged down by all the trauma.
Yeah.
Right. It's not
exactly.
Yeah, because there's little things that happen where I'm just like, yes, I can feel, I could see why someone would want, it's like I could see why someone would feel the disconnect from him going into space and fighting aliens or fighting this character that literally feels separate from the rest of us versus being like, oh yeah, he saves a cat up a tree because that's just him. I could see how someone could feel that disconnect, but sometimes you need that disconnect. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just what you need.
Yeah, it's kind of the point of the stories.
Yeah.
Now, before we get into the more modern stuff, the last little tiny bit, even Marvel got on the boat with deconstruction, and especially deconstructing other heroes. So
yes,
Marvel starts off with the Hyperion. If you've not read Squadron Supreme, which is what I've been talking about, is I said on when we did the Zack Snyder's Justice League episode, it feels more like a Squadron Supreme movie. Yeah. Squadron Supreme was a Marvel answer to what if these characters were bad guys. And they actually start off as a Squadron Sinister when they first appear. And Hyperion is basically a Superman analog who is evil. They more recently brought
But it was a whole team of them because you had an analog to Batman, analog to Wonder Woman.
Right, and they still do
I think
stuff
even
like that.
Aquaman got an analog.
Yeah.
Eventually. I can't remember who the first ones were. The main one, the one that was actually most interesting, and this is, again,
there was a Speedster, there
no
was
lack of a
Lantern
Speed
Light.
Demon. Speed Demon stayed.
Dr. Light would have been there.
Dr. Spectrum.
Spectrum.
Dr.
He
Spectrum.
was Green Lantern-esque.
He's Green Lantern-esque. But the one that is mostly interesting is Nighthawk. Nighthawk was their Batman.
Yeah.
And in the first Squadron Sinister story, Nighthawk actually gets on this world. He comes over and he actually sees the Avengers or whoever are able to, I think it's the Avengers, are able to convince him that their way of thinking is wrong, and he sides with this world and goes out to fight his own team.
Yeah.
And so he ends up being a very prominent character in the thing. We were talking about the upcoming throwback to Heroes Reborn in the Marvel Universe, where there's a book focusing on this other world's Nighthawk, and they're making Miles Morales in that world is going to be his Falcon.
Yes.
So his Robin / Falcon. So it's a cool fun one that they play with and everything. And what are some of the other ones you were telling us about, like movies and TV? Venture Brothers?
Venture Brothers has a lot of analogs to different superheroes and different superhero tropes, but I think that's more parody.
Well, and that's more
parody because it's pretty dark. But that one's the one that's going to sit right on the edge. Yeah. That one's going to be right on the edge of this week dark. And
it depends on what episode you talk about.
So yeah. I feel the difference there is, yes, they have a lot of analogs, but it's done in a joke fashion. Whereas most of the time, at least to me, your deconstruction has a point.
Okay.
Not everyone gets the
point.
It's
the difference between farce and social commentary.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Exactly.
Because it's
it's the same thing with The Tick.
Most of the commentary is more self-deprecating than anything.
Yeah, The Tick. We'll talk about that one next time. How do you feel about Superman 3?
Superman 3.
With Richard Pryor, where he gets split in half. Does that count?
Split in half. He gets turned.
He does. He turns evil.
Yeah.
Then at the end, he gets split in half.
Because he gets attacked with corrupted kryptonite because they couldn't fabricate all the elements, and so
yeah, it's one of those.
Richard Pryor stuck tar and nicotine into the kryptonite matrix, and it made Superman Jones and really bad. And
still very underimpressed. It's like, but I think it comes from a different perspective of me being a younger person who's had to listen to this stuff all the time. So it's suddenly like, oh no, he's evil again.
Again, right.
Who would have guessed this would happen?
Brightburn. What do y'all think about Brightburn?
God.
You mentioned Brightburn earlier. What was your?
So it's like if I was sick of it by the time I got to sit and watch Superman 3, I was definitely sick of it by the time Brightburn came out.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah.
It's like it wasn't a terrible movie. I wasn't having fun.
But what argument was it trying to make?
It wasn't.
That whole Blair Witch ending. I'm like, it's like, that's it?
Yeah.
What's your statement here?
I don't feel like it was making a deconstruction, Superman could have gone horribly wrong statement, because Superman was not psychotic.
Well, and the problem,
this kid had other issues than his superpowers.
Yeah, I think what they were trying to do with that is they were trying to bring in the element of, they were trying to do the nature versus nurture thing,
yeah.
but they switched it. So in Red Sun, it's a nurture thing of, this is
where he's raised at.
Yeah, this is where he's raised.
He's still
it changes
a person, but it's, yeah.
In the case of that, and apparently a couple of other things that started popping up, Brightburn was more of a,
it doesn't matter how good people were.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how nice we raise you. He's still a violent alien.
Fundamentally.
Who's come here to basically, invade us. Which I'm like, cool, but I didn't feel nothing about it. It didn't feel profound to me.
You're right.
It was just someone trying to be like, we're going to make him evil, but we're going to switch this. And it was like,
Yeah.
I know it's one of those, I would have had more fun watching it if they didn't tell me that. If they didn't sit there and say, this is a Superman story, but he's evil, I would have been like, okay, I'll have fun.
Big question I have. Watchmen comics versus Watchmen movie.
Comics.
The comics is a lot more engaging of a read, and also it gets blinded by Zack Snyder's own weird, creepy worldviews.
Mm-hmm.
So
there are things that change that literally ruin the comic.
Stephen King. So I find usually that whatever I do first is the one I like. If I read the book first, I like it better than the movie. If I saw the movie first, I like it better than the book.
What I had a problem with the movie was the fact that Zack Snyder didn't seem to understand the importance of certain scenes to certain characters.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if it was for budgetary reasons or what, but the one that really broke the movie for me was when Rorschach loses it and kills the guy who killed the little girl.
Mm-hmm.
In the house, because in the movie he just goes psycho and stabs him to death.
Yeah.
Whereas in the comic book, he chains him to a furnace, a metal furnace, throws down a hacksaw and says, "You've got 5 minutes to cut through your wrist or 30 minutes to cut through the chain." And he lights the house on fire, and he steps outside to make sure he burns to death, because that was more of a punishment.
Yeah.
Instead of Rorschach losing his...
Yeah, it's part of his character.
And one of the other things that bugs me, and I'm constantly told that this shouldn't be a big deal, but to me it is, especially when they came out with the Watchmen TV show. In the comic books, yes, they were genetically engineered, I get it, but you had the giant alien monsters, squids and everything that invaded it. That's what makes world peace possible, because everyone's going, we're getting invaded,
It's the basic philosophy. It's us versus them, the psychology.
In the movie,
they have a common enemy to rally behind. They'll keep.
Yeah, and in the movie, they took that same approach. They made all this fuss about genetic engineering and all this, and we're making Manhattan the bad guy.
Which I understand. I understand exactly. I understand them making him, because it basically you truncate it to a more feasible time frame for a movie. But you're right. Why do they have all the genetic engineering? I mean, other than for him to have that links, because Ozymandias' links is a genetic experimentation, and it's explained in the comic books where that links comes from. And then when they do the movie, and he just shows up in his ice fortress with this cool CG cat.
And we don't talk about it.
We don't talk about it.
We're just like, whatever, man.
To the TV
and then you're supposed to feel bad when he gets obliterated.
Right.
Right. But then you get to the TV show, and Ozzy's in his little fortress in the Antarctica, randomly pelting parts of the world with frozen squids, because it's a remnant feature of the aliens coming through their portals. So he's still keeping the world in check with the same threat that he made in the comic book, not the movie.
No,
but that's fine. I mean, the thing that I think that the TV show shows better is the fact that when you have more time to flesh things out, you can really do those payoffs that you're talking about. Whereas with the movie, you don't have the time to really, like, one of the things that I was really sad with missing from the movie was the whole psychiatrist thing. Rorschach's psychiatrist.
Yeah.
And watching that relationship over time, and how when the psychiatrist at the very beginning, he didn't care about Rorschach. All he thinks about is, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to be famous, I'm going to get so much money out of this.
It messes him up so bad by
And
the end.
I mean, it gets to a point where, like, he's having dinner with his family, and he's not, he's not happy with his family and friends there, and they're like, are you okay? What's going on? He's like, oh, I just had a session. And he tells them a story of what happened with Rorschach, and everybody's throwing up, and it ruins that whole.
Well,
yeah.
Sit down.
Well, it goes back to our fundamental definition from the start here is how much of deconstruction is political commentary and trying to be more mature, and how much is the exact opposite, is how much of it is just expression of violent aggression or trying to get away with something or pushing the envelope, edgy for the sake of being edgy.
Well, and that is a Zack Snyder curse for anybody who's gone farther back. I know they're Zack Snyder fans, but I'm sorry.
He doesn't know the difference.
Well, the problem is that the bits he likes to trim out are the commentary. Mm-hmm. And so what ends up being left, because he had this problem with the, what is it called, The Evil Dead? It's like the zombie movie.
Did you do The Evil Dead?
He did, yeah. It's like he did basically the modern version of one of the older zombie movies. It's like the older zombie movie. Huh?
The one at the mall?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, but what he
Return
does.
of the Living Dead or something like that.
Yeah, but what he tends to do is he has a history of trimming out the political commentary. And so it alters the story. Like, if I were to sit there and dice up the major changes he made in Watchmen, it takes away the story of, wow, these are really messed up characters.
And it also devalues the actions, like the violence.
Yeah.
It makes, you don't feel it.
He wants it to look cool.
Yeah, I've always said this about Zack Snyder. He's really great at visuals.
Dawn of the Dead, yes.
He's really amazing at visuals and
he's style over substance.
He's very much style over substance, but he doesn't seem to pay attention to character or to story.
No.
It's all about, like
it's
Batman versus Superman was a perfect example of this. He took like some of the, the more visual scenes out of like 5 different completely separate
completely unrelated stories.
Yeah.
And mashed them together and then tried to make a story out of it. I mean, you've got elements of Dark Knight Returns, elements of Doomsday, you've got elements of Death of Superman, you've got elements of, all these are mashed into one movie, and they don't really fit together.
And they don't need to.
That's why the new Watchmen series on HBO was amazing, is because
it was such a joy.
It gave you a chance to flesh those characters out. Their actions had weight, had consequence. You understood the motivation, whether you got it or not, but you understood where they were coming from.
Right.
And you had that. And that's a big thing about it, is these it's very hard for one-shot stories or things of that nature to really do it, because, or like a movie or something, because you need that in depth. Like, it took like 2 years, I think, for Azrael to go through his entire cycle of becoming Batman and then being stripped of Batman and then trying to rebuild himself. And that was a really good deconstructive story, and it touched on everything from religion to societal status to just a host of psychological issues and things, and it was one of the really cool ones.
Right.
Well, also one of the things that I think is really cool is if you really think about it, WandaVision and Falcon Winter Soldier are both deconstruction.
Definitely.
They're very much going through that entire core character arc of tearing him down from the very base and then building him right back up.
That arguably is still part of Hero's journey. Like, that's in every comic.
Right.
Every comic story, to me, superhero story is going to have those elements.
Right.
But
it's like, well, and Falcon and the Winter Soldier plays it more interesting right now, which, sorry if I accidentally leak any sort of spoilers. It's like, basically, I mean, the problem is that he doesn't want to be Captain America just because he doesn't feel like he is. Yeah. So he has to spend those 6 episodes basically meeting all the deconstructed versions of Captain America for him to come back and say, this is who this is why I'm Captain
I
America.
ultimately think that a lot of those modern elements are more attributed to the medium than the source, because it's not so much that, yes, definitely modern comic books, even just regular ones kids read, are deeply influenced
Yeah.
by deconstructivism. I mean, that's in everything now. But I think it's more of, because it's on television and it's on a premium format, and it's a different storytelling medium, and they're incorporating things that we're used to seeing in other TV, not
Yeah.
necessarily other comics.
Right.
That's kind of how I feel that one on that.
It's
I
a
will
story
have to say
piece
this
thing,
though.
yeah.
I thoroughly enjoyed WandaVision, and I'm
I like
massively
WandaVision.
enjoying.
Yeah.
And then they're gonna make us wait like 6 weeks before Loki. Like,
Is it going to be 6
Yeah.
weeks?
Yes!
No!
At first they said it was going to be like 1 week between each one, but they announced like yesterday or something that it's 6 weeks. They're going to make us wait 6 weeks. So,
How
so
scary.
we're going
Right.
to talk for a couple more minutes on deconstruction now. What's going on now in the world of deconstruction? Like I said, it's a very influential aspect of comic books. It's almost become a trope into itself.
Well, TV-wise, The Boys is still going on.
The
right?
Boys is a really big popular one.
The
It's moving into its, what, third
Yeah.
season?
It'll have
It's
its
about
third
to have
season.
its third
It's about to have its
season.
third season. Now, it's on Amazon Prime. If you haven't seen it, it is hardcore. The most deconstructive superhero thing I can imagine. When
I had a hard time getting through episode 1.
God dang
We
it.
all sat through episode
Who
1,
writes-
and
who
it was
writes-
such an unpleasant experience.
Who writes The Boys? Warren Ellis?
I-
No, it's. It's the same writer who wrote Preacher. And
I'll admit I liked Preacher.
I actually kind of like
Who wrote
Preacher.
The Boys.
But basically, before The Boys came out, if you've not seen Preacher, the comic
Yes,
book
Garth Ennis.
it was Garth Ennis. Okay. Garth Ennis, not Warren Ellis. I get those two confused. Garth Ennis.
Yeah.
So if you've seen Preacher, it's pretty visceral. It
It's
is
gross.
It goes beyond being gory. It's gross. But the comic book was actually grosser. Okay. And
Right.
when Garth Ennis was talking and promoting The Boys, he's basically saying he wanted to challenge himself. He's quoted as saying he wanted to challenge himself and see if he can make something worse than Preacher. Like, literally, that was his motivation for the superhero stories, to make it worse than Preacher.
Right.
And honestly, I can't even bring myself to watch the show. We all did sit down and watch the pilot last week because we're suffering for our art. But
I forced
it was
myself-
a hard pull.
I think
I forced
it's
myself
only
through 2
fair
more
to say right
episodes.
now, I am so tired of dark by this point that if I even have a hint that it's going to be dark, I don't want to read it. I don't want to
You
see
know,
it.
Well,
I want positivity in this world.
I kind of think of it this way. It's like clowns, right?
Yeah.
Like, you have to try and put your brain back in time to a time when these clowns were actually considered to be happy and joyful and exciting, and people saw them and it was funny, and then they would go to circuses or parades or whatever, and they would all be laughing and whatnot.
Yeah, I
and
never
then-
liked clowns.
But then when they started,
Actually, I know a couple clowns. They're pretty cool.
then they started deconstructing clowns. It's like, oh, what if we took this innocuous thing that's supposed to be happy and make it kind of like evil and violent?
Yeah, but that one
You get
had
the
a very...
Joker. And then it starts actually spiraling downtown. And now we're at the point where, in the conscious mind, there are so many evil clowns that most people born now who've been born this
We don't trust clowns. We don't trust
clowns.
clowns.
It just automatically, it never really occurs to you. You automatically are suspicious of clowns. Are
Killer clowns
completely.
from outer
But
space.
that is
Oh my
more...
God, yeah.
But this that zones
It.
into more of a specific reason than anything.
Yeah.
That's it. Because it was Ed Gein, I think, who was the... It's like basically serial killer was a party clown.
Yes.
That is the specific
yeah.
thing that literally, if you follow all the threads back, it's surprise. It's because the serial murderer was a clown.
Yes, absolutely.
And then we just all broke.
But yeah.
Yeah.
And
When the episode's over, remind me to tell you my clown story.
So basically,
God.
basically what I'm saying is
I don't like
deconstruction
clowns.
is very much like clowns. It's gotten to the point now where it's not the subversion of expectation. It's becoming the norm. It's like everybody is automatically suspicious of superhero comic books now. And
Well-
I mean, unless you are buying a child's comic book, you kind of go in expecting there to be some of this deconstruction.
Well, and
Yeah.
it's like it kind of goes back to the thing I mentioned about it's like it's two things I've noticed. Because one, it's the dark and gritty comic book times where it's like, yeah, we're gonna have this stuff, and it's just gonna have a bunch of random violence in it. It's like it's a combination of we feel like people feel more grown up when they have these kind of comics versus these kind of comics. But also, I've noticed lately, especially now that we're trying to integrate more interesting things into stories, not only are people doubling down, but whenever people are challenged on certain things, like I respect Alan Moore as a writer. I do not like Alan Moore stuff. And if you were to go up to an Alan Moore guy who's like super into Alan Moore, if I were to say, hey, I don't like the fact that there is a story about all of these child characters being grown up so they could be
brutally murdered and such.
It's basically a Alice in Wonderland has sexcapades. And I'm like, hey, that's kind of weird and messed up. And the more people are starting to challenge those old things that people thought were gritty and fun and cool, the more they're doubling down and saying, no, but there's a really deep meaning in it if you actually look. And so the problem is that it's trying to integrate with each other where, we want to have the boys where he admitted, I just did it to be dark and gritty.
Right.
Yeah. I didn't mean it to mean anything.
Talking about Alan Moore, I forgot V for Vendetta is a really good.
I love V for Vendetta.
Yeah, V for Vendetta. That
movie was amazing.
It was like 83, but Hugo Weaving did a great job.
Hugo Weaving showed so much skill in that role that he was amazing.
To be able
showing
to
body
with that mask on.
Yeah, he managed. I gotta tell this about all the time. It impresses me. That mask was created so well.
Yeah.
That it had certain creases in it that it was specifically designed to have different expressions from different angles.
Right.
And the combination of that and his emoting through it, it actually fools your brain into thinking that his face is changing. Like he's laughing and his face looks like it's laughing, or he's crying and his face looks like it's crying, but it's the same mask.
Yeah. It's fascinating.
And it's a really and for somebody to pull that off through pantomime is just like phenomenally talented.
Well, I mean, we could go on and a love fest for Hugo Weaving because I mean, just look at how he did Red Skull. Just the right amount of accent.
Yeah,
right.
You know what I'm saying? That he didn't want to come back and reprise the role.
It's like, but yeah, it's that kind of stuff where it's like, the problem is that people have these tried and true things that they're like, oh yeah, no, if we want to make this a gritty scenario that means something, we need to do this. Like, if a girl has to have trauma, she has to be assaulted. She has to be sexually assaulted. That's it.
I'm 90% certain there are other ways women can pick up trauma than sexual assault.
And people are saying stuff like that, and the problem is it's causing the people who are used to these dark and gritty things to double down and say, no, it has to be like that. You're just missing the meaning of it.
So another thing that's currently going on, also on Amazon Prime, one thing that we're talking, and it was to you a minute ago, we were talking about how we thought it was one thing and then it ended up being another. We thought it was just like, the gross for the sake of being gross and actually having more of a
it lightens up.
Tighter point. So it's Invincible.
Yeah, I'm like, not yet.
Yeah, not yet.
Not yet.
That one's coming. Invincible. Invincible is cool. We actually watched it to just get a sense of it. I honestly expected it was going to be more boys-ish. I honestly thought they were going to just
It actually gets a lot more lighthearted after the first episode.
It is.
Minus some stuff.
And it's a good juxtaposition of the elements. It's definitely got a core in deconstructive story, but the rest of it still continues to play with those tropes and respond to them in a less traumatic way.
Yes, because light spoilers. At the end of the first episode of Invincible, there is a very, very violent murder. There is a very, very violent
series of very violent murders and horrible.
Or well, it's the same. It all happens at once, but it's like there is a very violent series of murders that happen all at once. And if you don't get past the first episode, that is incredibly jarring to look at because they make you watch it in all of its visceral glory detail.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll admit,
It is Mark Waid, okay.
yeah, I'll admit, I shut myself off after that because I was like, oh, no. It's like, but...
Well, here's the thing, for those of you who don't know this, and this is one of the reasons that Amazon was so hyper to pick it up. Irredeemable,
Invincible.
Okay. Invincible.
But also read the Irredeemable comic anyway.
Irredeemable, we're going to talk about in just a second, because it has a place. Invincible is written by the same guy who wrote the Evil Dead comic book.
Yes.
So that's one of the reasons I was expecting it to be a lot more.
Right.
And I'm sorry, my brain is full of facts, but I don't remember his name.
Well, it's Mark Waid, right?
No, Mark Waid is Irredeemable. So, because these are both on Amazon.
Wrote Irredeemable. Who wrote Invincible?
Right. No, yeah, Mark Waid is not Irredeemable. We just established that Mark Waid is amazing because I love Kingdom Come. That's like one of my all-time.
Well, Mark Waid has written just about every single superhero in
yeah, and he's
even written Archie.
Comic book.
Yeah.
Invincible.
He's written real good stuff, but he has a comic book that came out in. I think it came out in Image Comics.
Yes, it was an Image Comics.
Image Comics, many years back, and this one was one that was really hard for me to even get past the first.
Creators were Robert Kirkman and
Kirkman. Okay, so it's Kirkman. It's Kirkman's who does Impossible, Invincible, and Walking Dead. It's Robert Kirkman. Thank you. That was the name I couldn't remember. So Irredeemable is.
It's all right. It's one of those days. I'm sorry, guys.
All right. So anyway, Irredeemable, Mark Waid, is an Image comic book, and there's a character named the Plutonian who is basically that world's Superman. And this setup is that he's already got a fragile psyche to begin with. But he genuinely...
And this time we are talking Irredeemable.
But he's already got a fragile psyche to begin with, and this is a setup of where it's both a combination of nurture and nature, where he's fighting himself. Basically, he's brought up to be a hero and to be good, and his nature inside wants to do bad or evil or whatever, and he's constantly pulled between the two.
Right.
And it's when he finally opens up to his version of Lois Lane.
Someone he trusts
completely, so he tells her his identity in secret.
And what does she do? First of all, let me clarify. They work in the news in a radio station. She finds the first empty booth and goes online, going on air, so-and-so is so-and-so.
Yes.
It's like,
she was more in charge of the headline.
Obliterates.
His
Thank you. That word. His trust.
So anyway, in
that book, he stabs.
It's like the entire book is just a story of an evil Superman.
Right.
And he snaps and kills. He rips them apart.
Right. And in the case of Invincible, it's more of a nurture thing than it is a nature versus nurture fight, where there is a thing which trying to word it in a way that won't spoil it, because he told me what was going on. So I'm trying to figure out a way to word it where it's like, basically,
it's the nurturing of his loving parents, but it's the nature of the society and culture of his father.
Or, well, in Invincible, he comes up later. Like, in Invincible, it's he was sent over there, and he was like, I believe in the good nature of people. But he stays because he's like, yeah, I like this girl. We can start a family. And it's like, the problem is that his responsibilities are coming back to hunt him.
Right.
And so he's fighting between his responsibilities as this alien soldier versus the things he's supposed to do as a superhero on this world that has a family.
It has a family and a father, exactly.
Father of a superhero.
Father of a now superhero.
Irredeemable, is one of the properties I think they're developing over at Netflix. I know that the first offering we have from Mark Miller universe, Mark Miller, who created another great deconstructed superheroes, Kick-Ass stories. Kick-Ass is a definite
I completely forgot about Kick-Ass.
But he sold his portfolio to Netflix, and the first offering we're getting out of that is what is it that's coming out? Jupiter's Legacy. Jupiter's Legacy. Now, Jupiter's Legacy.
We're gonna try again. Good for them.
Yeah, Jupiter's Legacy, for what I remember.
Not related to Jupiter Ascending.
Oh no, it's not. No, it is not related Jupiter ascending. It's a complete.
There's
So it
hope, guys.
So it doesn't matter if you like dogs.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if you like dogs. You know, you're not going to slather your
Sorry,
cells
that's
in
one of my
stem cells.
favorites.
It's just okay. No. This is
Yeah.
Jupiter's Legacy is more similar to Invincible, I believe. And it's where the older father superhero, who I believe, what do they call him?
Your golden age heroes trying to pass the torch to modern
call him
heroes.
The Utopian, if I remember correctly. I don't know. But at any rate,
Some
so yeah,
cute.
it's his.
Some cute name.
From the people I've talked to who have read it, they don't feel it's as much deconstruction as it's just more adult themes. But definitely there is darkness and secrets that the father is hiding. So I'm kind of wanting to see that. I kind of keep laughing when we're looking at like dictator Supermans, and they're like, and then there's what if Superman was Russian, and then there's the mustachioid Superman, and then there's what if Superman looked like Josh Duhamel as Santa Claus.
You know, yeah. You know what? As jarring as Omni-Man was, it's like, even though I know it's supposed to be J. Jonah Jameson, I'm like, it grew on me after a while.
Yeah, I know.
It took a couple episodes, but I was like, okay, I'm fine with this.
When that comic first came out, yeah, the mustache was like actually part of the selling point. I think a lot of people are drawn to like a mustache, Superman with a mustache.
Right? It's part of his contract. He just needs to have a mustache in everything he's in.
So yeah, but
I assume.
Right.
It's like, but yeah, it's like, sorry, I see it at the very bottom there. That is Superior.
Yeah, there's
Superior.
another character called Superior, and I cannot for the life of me remember what his shtick was. I know I wrote him down there.
He's another Superman.
He gets an honorable mention.
He's an honorable mention because he's another dark Superman. So.
It's like, yeah, for you guys who aren't seeing it over here, it's like basically from where I'm sitting, the bottom section of our little board is just completely cut off. So I have to be like, it's over there somewhere.
We mentioned the other stuff. The only other ones we didn't mention were the Justice League or Suicide Squad video game.
Yeah, it's like which is it stems from the Injustice plotline, right? Just the we're gonna make them evil.
Okay, so
they're corrupted
evil. But Superman goes evil,
and we didn't even talk about Invincible. I mean,
Injustice. Yeah.
So by the way, Injustice.
So video games. Injustice is a huge franchise based on the idea of Superman snapped and went evil because.
Right, and you're going to hear that question a lot because there's a lot of people going, "Oh, this is like Injustice," and if you don't know what that means, that's basically what it means.
Yeah. And they've had a long-running series of comic books based on it, which has been very popular. But it all focuses on the crux of the deconstructed superheroes. The superheroes are going bad.
Right.
And then the new Suicide Squad game is similar. They don't explain in the trailer why Superman is evil, only that he is, and so.
Right, because do you even care anymore?
Yeah,
it's fine.
I know.
It's a plot line. You're
I'm
like,
assuming
okay.
Lois is dead again. I don't know. So anyway, that's all the time we have for this week. Thank you guys so much. A lot of really fun and insightful ideas into whether you want to try some of these books out.
Right. We're gonna do the less sad part next week.
We're gonna do the happy part. We're gonna make fun of comics. We're gonna just straight up deconstruct them in a whole different way. But we're gonna have not that we don't have fun doing this all the time. So that's gonna be great. So anyway, make sure you like and subscribe and follow us on our parent station on YouTube, Kaiju Labs Media. Check out Dragon Lair Comics and Fantasy on Anderson. And just come back here for more superhero information. Always tell us how we're doing. Give us some ideas. If we said something wrong, we're okay with retractions.
Right, please correct us.
Please.
I don't know. Sometimes.
We try really hard. But we do appreciate you coming, and we'll see you next 2 weeks.
Yes, 2 weeks. All right. Bye, y'all.